Good evening. We have a lot of people here this evening, so we will move along as quickly as we can. My name is Suzanne Brunel. I'm a voting member here on the Zoning Board of Adjustment. I will call to order the meeting of the Zoning Board of Adjustment for September 17th, 2025. We'll do some quick introductions. If we could start with Nick.
My name is Nick Codner. I'm the building inspector and zoning administrator.
Kristen Farr, town planner.
Christine Perez, alternate.
Lisa Sussman, alternate.
Brennan O'Brien, full member.
Suzanne Brunel again. Thank you.
Mitch Feig, full member.
Bob Robichek, full member.
John Grennan, alternate member.
Okay, we are going to forego the minutes this evening. Report by town council liaison. I believe we are, coming forward. Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Just a word to everybody. They can't hear you out back, so talk closer to your mics.
Okay.
That would be great because you got a big crowd. I do not have anything unless you guys have anything for me. Glad to see everybody's here. Missing one person, but
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Regional impact determinations. I'm gonna,
None this evening.
no, okay. Just gonna give you some instructions on how we will proceed this evening for those of you who have not had the opportunity to be here before. I'm gonna provide some summary of how we are going to proceed this evening so everyone knows the process. Again, there's a lot of people here, so we are looking to have a respectful meeting. This is how it goes. The clerk is going to read the case into the record. The applicants will come forward. They will present their case here at these chairs. The board will address the applicants with any questions or comments after they're done with their presentation. Those that are in favor of the request will be given an opportunity to address the board, and those that are opposed or have questions regarding the request are given an opportunity to address the board. Anyone who is going to speak this evening should come up to this microphone here. We need your name and your address. Your questions and comments should be directed to the board. At no time should they be directed to the council or applicant. All conversation comes to the board and will be put from the board to the applicant. The board will then allow the applicant to address any questions and concerns. Again, those who wish to speak for or against will, I went through that, so never mind, apologize. We would ask that you please set your cell phones on vibrate or off during this meeting. And we more than likely will make a decision this evening. If for some reason you cannot stay, you can contact the town tomorrow and they will provide you with an update on the decision. At this time, I am going to need to recuse myself from the first two cases that are being heard this evening. Brendan will be appointed as the acting chair for this evening.
These for the first two cases.
Thank you.
First two cases, yeah.
First two cases, sorry. For the first two cases.
We need to appoint another voting
Yep.
member.
So I think we're going to appoint John and Lisa to hear the first two cases, just based on their seniority as alternates. Okay. And if anyone has anything else, I'll call the first case. Case number 820-2025-7, a request for a variance from LZO section 4.6.6.5 to allow the construction of 6 duplexes. The parcel is located at 296 Nashua Road in the C2 zoning district, tax map 2, lot 25-0, Vigent Family Properties LLC, owner and applicant. And I apologize if I didn't mention it before. If you could just state your name and address for the record, that'd be great, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. My name is, members of the board, my name is Morgan Hollis. I'm an attorney with Gottesman and Hollis at 39 East Pearl Street in Nashua, and I'm here representing the owner and applicant, Vigent Family Properties LLC. With me this evening are both Mr. and Mrs. Vigent, and also I have a representative of the engineering firm that's the project engineer on this, Fieldstone, and Dan is here to answer any questions that might be of a technical nature. My clients can answer other questions.
And Attorney Hollis, can I just ask you two questions before we get started? First, in our order is case number 820-2025-7, which is the duplexes case. And is that, I assume it's logical to start with that one, but I wanted to make sure that was your understanding as well.
Yes, I believe that makes sense. The second case is the encroachment, and
Correct.
if we don't get the use, we'll withdraw the encroachment.
Okay, understand.
I don't know how you vote, and sometimes you vote at the end of the meeting. If you choose to vote at the end of the first hearing, that may make a decision on the second.
So we will vote, we will hear the first one and vote on it, so you will have that decision. My second question for you is, I understand that there were variance applications related to this property earlier this year. The two we have before us now are both dated 8/20/2025. There were new applications that were submitted in August, is that correct?
That is correct, yeah, on both instances.
Okay, thank you.
So the old ones are withdrawn.
Okay.
The new ones are there.
Thank you.
And maybe as a housekeeping measure, I noticed when I went online that what was posted included an opinion letter, one opinion letter from Chet Rogers, a value opinion letter. There were actually two submitted, and I just wanted to be sure that in your packet you got two. It looked like the link to the town's packages, there were two. One opinion letter for each variance application. And if you didn't, I have multiple copies here this evening. It's slightly different variances, so it requires different opinions on value impacts.
I believe we received two different letters from Chet Rogers, but let me just confirm that before I tell you that definitively.
And I also noticed online that the signature page was not signed. I have the signature pages. I'm not sure how that transmitted that way, but could have been ink on the copier or something.
So when you say the signature page for the variance itself?
For the appraiser.
For the appraiser,
Yes.
okay. So to answer your first question, we have two separate opinion letters from Chet Rogers. And with respect to your second question, I believe the letters we have are unsigned from him. If you have the signature pages, I can take them now, or that's fine with me.
They're separate pages. You can distinguish.
Thank you. Can I keep these?
Yes.
Thank you.
As read in, there are there's one variance for use and one variance for impacts or encroachment in the buffer. And I'll address each one separately because they stand alone as separate variance applications. But I'm going to introduce the property with the first one, which takes a little bit longer. And if we get to the second one, then I'll just mention that the introduction should be carried over into the record for the second one, rather than reiterate everything.
Understand.
The property itself is Lot 25, Map 2. It's in the C2 zone, and the performance overlay Route 102 Overlay District. The property is 15.07 acres. It does have 623.34 feet of frontage. However, only 173 feet of that is at the entryway to the property. If you look to the plans that have been submitted, they're GIS plans that were submitted with the application. And the first GIS plan, which is an aerial view, gives you a view of the property. That's what's up on the screen now. And as you look at the blue, the lower left corner is the access area to the property. The property to the frontage on the right is in a easement and also adjacent to wetlands. So the only true opening available is that lower left side, and that is 173 feet. The description of the property is somewhat important, but I'll harp on that a little more when we get to the uniqueness of the property. Identifying the property itself, as I pointed out, there's a great deal of a power line easement area, and there's also a great deal of wetlands. The wetlands are the lithium spring wetlands, which themselves require an increased buffer setback from most any other wetlands in your town. So between the wetlands, the type of the wetlands, the power line easement, the frontage limitations, we have a site that we're looking at making use of approximately the area that's cleared as you look on the plan itself. As you know, C2 allows and promotes, for the most part, commercial uses. As well, the Performance Overlay District encourages and promotes commercial uses to take for the benefit of the fact that Route 102 is a major thoroughfare, major highway. The uses, if you look to the next slide, maybe it's back. That'd be the appraisers. That's his, keep going. One more maybe, there it is. So if you scroll up, please, on this slide, you will see the area of the property outlined, and that's on, the northerly side of Route 102. The areas that are zoned in the performance overlay are across the road and to the west of the road. To the west side or left-hand side as you're looking at the subject premises, and above it or to the northerly side is all zoned AR, and to the easterly side the same. So you can see what a bit of an anomaly this parcel is. Also, although zoned as commercial 2 and zoned as performance overlay, that little cutout of the parcel is a single-family residence. It's a non-conforming use, but it's a pre-existing non-conforming use, so it's residential there. Immediately to the left is an open area which is zoned commercial, but it has limited size and frontage, as you can see. But when you first look at this in the zoning map and you look at it on this particular screen, you have a sense of, well, it's a fairly large commercial property, and therefore that's what ought to be developed there. It's in the C2 zone. But as I pointed out, almost clearly a majority, and almost all of the property is limited by the power lines, the wetlands, and we'll get into the buffers in a minute, but also the frontage access. We have one access point. If you've driven by the site, you'll realize as you go down 102, headed from the west as you're headed towards Londonderry, on the left-hand side, there is a roadway which leads up to the Hickory Woods condominium, and that is all zoned AR. That property itself was originally zoned as C2, but in 2019 the zoning was changed to AR. As I say, behind it is AR, in front of it is a residence, and to the right of it is AR. So that identifies the property. The proposed use of the property is for 6 duplexes, and if you could find a screen that, not sure where you are in what order, I know my order, but I don't think
What are you
that's-
looking for?
I'm looking just for the layout of the units that we're asking for. Site plan, there it is. So you can see this one is sort of at the side angle of what we were looking at, but you can see that we come in off of Nashua Road, Route 102, and then there is a proposed road going in, and then that area of the field that you saw in the aerial is where we're proposing the use. We have done a analysis of what can fit in there for septic and what could fit in there for roadways, and you have to have, of course, for fire safety, a cul-de-sac turnaround. So what you see is 4 buildings on one side, and that's on the side closest to Hickory Woods, and 2 buildings on the other. We're asking for permission to have 6 duplexes in the layout as presented on this plan. We're not allowed to do that because market rate housing of this nature, duplex market rate housing, is not a permitted use. There are some permitted housing uses, but they're workforce housing and apartment housing. And neither of those really, the apartment housing doesn't fit in there, and the cost to utilize this property does not work financially for workforce housing. So we're down to duplexes. We're not looking at townhouses. We're not looking at multifamily apartment buildings. We're looking for the right to use this for duplex housing, maximum of 6 buildings. I'm going to jump right into the criteria for the first use ordinance, first use variance request. In order to grant a variance, this board must find that granting a variance is not contrary to the public interest. So the application is to allow residential use. You have to make a determination whether allowing this type of use, 6 duplexes, is contrary to the public interest. Public interest has always been a difficult thing to define, but the New Hampshire Supreme Court has somewhat narrowed the issue by a series of cases which says what you have to determine as a zoning board, as you all know, you've heard more of these cases than I've ever presented, but you have to decide that, in fact, you're not going to materially alter the character of the neighborhood. So you have to look at the character of the neighborhood. As I outlined on those plans, the character of the neighborhood is distinctly residential. Residential in front of it, residential beside it, residential behind it, and open space under the power lines and in the wetlands. The area is not distinctly what it appears to be on the zoning map. It is what appears in reality on the aerial photograph. Allowing 6 buildings, each building having 2 units of market rate housing, will not alter the character of the neighborhood. In fact, it will be in keeping with the character of the neighborhood. The second issue you have to discuss and decide and determine whether it's contrary to the public interest is whether or not the proposed use, if the variance is granted, will threaten the public health, safety, or welfare. The public health, safety, and welfare is usually determined by a review of what services are available. Okay, there's public water, municipal water that's available at this site, so you're not going to be affecting anyone's wells by putting in 6 duplex units. Based upon, the second issue usually is sewer. In this instance, there is no municipal sewer servicing this site. Any use, whether it's commercial or residential, will be on a septic system. There's adequate area within the project to establish a septic field or fields for these uses. And of course, it goes through the Department of Environmental Services approval, your health department. All of those matters get reviewed as to whether or not there's adequate soil conditions to support septic. We've made a preliminary determination that there is, so we would argue there would be no threat to public health, safety, or welfare. In addition, we have a significant setback from any wetlands, so that any leaching that may occur will not be going into any wetlands. Those wetlands are, of course, under the power line. We have no abutters on that side, which is the downhill, topographic downhill side, which would be where any leaching would occur in any event. Nothing's going to leach to the north, to the west, I'm sorry. So we think we've covered the two prongs of if you grant the variance, it will not be contrary to the public interest. The third issue that occasionally comes up and is raised in this first being not contrary to public interest under health, safety, and welfare is the question of traffic. Well, in this instance, the road is controlled by NHDOT. The applicant, my client, and the owner of the property has received a driveway permit to allow the driveway to come out there for residential development greater than 3 units. They've analyzed the proposal, they've looked at the traffic, they've looked at the impact of the traffic on the roadway, the safety, the line of sight, and a permit's been issued. So that kind of solves the question of, are you sure you're not going to have a traffic safety issue due to 6 duplexes and their associated traffic of ins and outs? The second requirement of a variance is that you can't grant a variance unless the spirit of the ordinance is observed. As a matter of law, and I don't like to preach law, but as a matter of law, the intent of this portion of the ordinance is the spirit of a zoning ordinance, not the spirit and intent of a particular portion of the zoning ordinance. So what are we looking at? You know what the purpose of a zoning ordinance is. It's to protect values. It's to keep uses that would not have a significant adverse impact upon their neighbors clustered in various areas, residential with residential, commercial with commercial, etc. And you look to the master plan oftentimes to determine, well, what was the intent of the people in enacting the ordinance. The master plan is not a document you follow, but it's something that the zoning ordinance is supposed to try to pick up on. And in your case, you passed the zoning ordinance for a performance overlay district to encourage commercial use. It's quite clear. It's in your ordinance why it was done. There's a purpose. Same thing with C2. The purpose and intent of the commercial 2, that's a highway, major highway. You have commercial uses on the major roadway. That's what this zone is for. This parcel is different because it doesn't really have property that can be utilized on Route 102 other than a roadway entrance. So you now get to what the Supreme Court has said, which is, as you know, number 2 is about the same as number 1. Is there a material alteration of the character of the neighborhood? If you grant this variance, will it materially alter the character of the neighborhood? The neighborhood is established, as I said, on the westerly side and northerly side, so to speak. It's the Hickory Woods Condominium Association, which is a development of 98 age-restricted housing, detached condominium units of top quality. It's residential in nature. Immediately adjacent to it is below our property or between our property and the roadway is a single-family home. Again, established there, probably not a lot big enough to carry much commercial use. The area itself will not be adversely altered significantly or materially altered by the granting of allowing 6 buildings on this property for a total of 12 single-family units. It won't threaten health, safety, or welfare for the reasons already stated on number 1. I won't reiterate them. The third criteria is granting the variance must do substantial justice, and substantial justice has been determined to be sort of a balancing act. You can't grant a variance which will cause public harm that outweighs any private gain to the owner. So you have to look first to what public harm is created if you grant the variance. As I said, this is going to be 6 duplex units, a single entry driveway with a driveway permit that's already been approved by NHDOT. So it's not going to affect the traffic or the corridor. There's going to be a distance as proposed between the houses and the property line. There's a pretty significant distance between the property line and the closest structure. I believe it's 40 feet roughly between the stone wall property line and the closest structure, which happens to be the clubhouse and some other affiliated outbuildings. And then it's about 45 feet to the closest unit, and then you get considerably farther away as the units exist out there in Hickory Woods. There will be substantial gap in between these residential units and the next residential units. Clearly, much more gap than exists out there between the residential units in Hickory Woods. So there is going to be this buffer between a one residential development and another residential development. If you deny the variance, there's nothing gained to the public, nothing being saved out there. It would require someone to come in with a very creative approach to put in a commercial project next to a residential development. So that's not a gain to the public, that's a loss to the public, in my opinion. So if you don't have a gain to the public, if you deny it, and you don't have any loss to the public if you grant it, substantial justice weighs in favor of the applicant. So we think we've met that criteria. I think I would also add under substantial justice, this site has always been C2. I mentioned, of course, Hickory Woods was C2, but was rezoned not that long ago to make it AR. So that sets the tone of really what this district is all about. Number 4, granting the variance will not diminish the values of surrounding properties. I believe you have a residential duplex adjacent to residential single-family detached condominium units. The proximity of the units to the neighbors is about the same, the 30 versus 40. The distance of open space is probably going to be more on our side than on their side, since they have some facilities that have, been created, a tennis or paddleball court and looks like a batting cage. Those things are somewhat close to the boundary line, but we will have, under the proposal, if variances are granted, we'll have about the same distance from the stone wall, which is the boundary line out there. We don't believe that there would be any impact on values, given that you're having residential to residential. And the addition of really 12 units, of which only 4 buildings or 8 units can be considered proximate to that boundary line. The other 2 are on the other side of the road. Won't have that adverse impact. But although that seems like a fairly logical conclusion, I did engage a independent appraiser who did not work for the applicant, nor for me. They're not engaged by anybody other than for this particular job. That report, it was in your package, and I will read the summary of it just for the public record. The report is from J. Chet Rogers, a commercial real estate appraiser, P.O. Box 1138, Hollis, New Hampshire. It's dated August 28th. It's addressed to me. The introduction is simply he is writing in response to my request, and he's presenting an analysis and indicating that he's an independent appraiser. He summarizes the site and the abutting sites accurately, much as I've just cited them. He does point out that surrounding properties include single-family residential use to the west, wetlands to the east and north, and the flea market directly across the road. It also points out the single-family home that this property surrounds in the front. Proposed plans call for the construction of up to 6 duplex units. The setback is 400 feet from Nashua Road. It's serviced by municipal water with on-site septic. And then he gets into, he says, duplex housing of this size and scope are not allowed under the ordinance. However, duplexes classified as workforce housing are allowed with a conditional use permit. So that would be decided by the planning board. I opine that allowing this lot for duplex use where water is available and septic systems are possible and where there are residential uses adjacent to the subject property and a substantial tree line buffer on the west side does not alter the character of the neighborhood and will not detract from the aesthetics of the area. No abutters will notice any difference. Additionally, it is noted that the allowed uses for this site, including multifamily with a conditional use permit, would be more intense and less harmonious uses not in character with the neighborhood. In my opinion, granting the variance requested to allow residential development consisting of up to 6 duplexes in the C2 zone and the Route 102 corridor performance overlay district where such use is not permitted will not adversely affect the real estate values of the abutters or the neighborhood in general. Number 5 is the hardship argument. As you know, there are 3 prongs of the hardship argument. We have to establish that the property has unique conditions, and then we have to establish that due to those unique conditions, enforcement of the ordinance as to this restriction that we're asking relief from bears no fair and substantial relationship to the purpose for which it was passed. And if you get through those 2 hurdles, you get to the third one, which is the proposed use a reasonable use for the site? So I'll address the first one. I said it's unique. I believe I introduced it as a unique parcel. If you look at the zoning map, it's the whole in the donut, so to speak. It's the last undeveloped commercial 2 parcel, except for the little frontage piece immediately in front of the Hickory Woods condominium. I'm not sure what that's going to end up being, but there are issues with entry and exit there. It is surrounded by residents, literally surrounded by residents or open space or wetlands, and undevelopable. You look at the shape of the lot, and you can determine where the buildable area is on the plans that have been submitted. You can see what's buildable and not, but we have a plan, if you would point that out, Dan, that's up there, I think.
On the half size too, it's the yellow area is what's buildable without any relief.
Which sheet is that?
It's the same, I think you have the color up on, but it's the same, basically, it's hatched in dots on the section.
Yeah, you received the site plan, that one,
that one.
but it's a little hard to determine. So I asked him to color in yellow, so you can see where the setbacks are, you can see what's available. Sure. Sure.
There's a pink line up here, which is a 75-foot buffer to the AR1 zone. The yellow area is the developable area with no relief, because this orange line right here is the wetland buffer from the Lithia Springs prime wetlands. So there's about 6/10 of an acre that's developable without any relief on this property.
And I think it's also important to note that just getting into this property and putting a road in there is going to require relief because it's in the buffer of the POD. So you can't really access this property or get into this property without some level of relief. It makes the property essentially inaccessible due to that buffer. We think that this is a unique parcel because there's no other parcel in this area like it. There's no other parcel that has the limited frontage. The topography, if you've driven by it, you note there's a little high area, and then it starts to slope down towards the residential area. That's the limited area that you can have access in. When you get out into the field, it's the high and dry area, and it is, as I say, adjacent to the Hickory Farms condominium development, and any use that goes in there, or C2 or POD nature, which is commercial in nature, is going to have a very significant impact on the neighbors. This piece is truly one of a kind in the area. Why couldn't you use it for, why is it difficult to use it for commercial use? It doesn't have the visibility. Again, if you've driven by that site, and I'm sure all of you have gone by it one time or another, probably in the last month as well, you know that the house is there, but you have to look twice to see how you're going to get to the area behind it, and that's that little gap between the upland area of the lot directly in front of Hickory Farms and this existing house. It's just this narrow area. The purpose of a performance overlay district and the purpose of a commercial 2 zoning district is you want commercial uses. You want to have good tax base. You want to have uses that are going to be commercial in nature, have frontage, and be on Route 102, so they're not driving through neighborhoods. Enforcing that regulation here, requiring that type of use on this lot, bears not even fair and substantial relationship, it bears no relationship to the purpose of those zoning ordinances. Application of that restriction on that slot bears no relationship to the reason it was zoned for POD. As you know, zoning is oftentimes just a single, it's not a three-dimensional, it's not even a one-dimensional sometimes. It's just pick a plot, mark it out, zone it. Before, they rezoned Hickory Woods and made it residential, and it's a very nice project. I'm very familiar with it. I was involved in it. Before that was done, that was all zoned commercial. That was all part of the POD overlay. That was all part of maybe a potential commercial development. What you're left with is a little strip here. There is no fair and substantial relationship due to the uniqueness of the lot to enforcing the ordinance restriction against this property. So that gets down to the final question, is what we propose reasonable? 6 units on the acreage that we're proposing, and the distance we're giving the building setback, it actually is the building setback of the underlying zone. We're setting back, the buildings won't be any closer than 30 feet. We're not proposing to remove any trees. Our major concern is that when we put the houses up, those trees that are, I would say, half in the Hickory Woods and half out, if you've walked it or been out there, that was my observation. Half of the stumps are on the one side of the stone wall, and the other half are on the other side. It's not our objective to go out there and cut them, even though I guess one could if you weren't proposing a development. You could cut trees on your property. The objective is to keep as many as possible. Everybody wants that. But when you build and you dig roots, if you get into and find out the roots are coming your way to where you're digging, you have to make an analysis of the size of the tree and whether there's going to be a threat to safety once you've completed your construction. I've been involved in development and construction for over 40 years, and I can tell you that there are many projects that they save these trees at the request of the neighbors, only to have the neighbors say, please, would you take them down? They're going to drop on us. So those decisions make in the field, but our effort is to save as many trees as possible. Whatever's on their property, we can't take down, and we won't take down. But it's not our intent to go out there and cut those trees down at all. We think the proposed use of the 4 units as laid out on this plan, and the application, of course, is as submitted per plan. If we wanted to change it, we'd have to come back to the zoning board. We think it's a reasonable proposal in that it keeps the roadway farther away from anyone. It's backyards to residential units backing up to the recreational facilities of the club, including the clubhouse, including the areas that are set up for recreational use. Trees are going to be there. Only 4 buildings and only a total of 8 units. All duplexes, it won't be multifamilies, it won't be townhouses. There's plenty of gap between those buildings, as I say, not so dissimilar to the Hickory Woods condominium distances between units. With that, I think I've covered all 5 points. I'm happy to answer any questions anyone may have. And if I can't answer them, I hope that my client or the project engineer can.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the board?
I guess I have a question. So are these, just to make sure, you mentioned market rate, but somewhere else you mentioned workforce housing, I believe, because of the master plan, but what are these going to be, market rate?
Market rate. Workforce, we would not be here. We would be before the planning board.
Yeah, that's one question. Anybody else have any questions?
We do think it's in the public interest that this type of housing be encouraged in the town, as it's a diversity of types of housing. There aren't a whole lot of duplexes. That allows for professionals to not have to live in an apartment building before they are ready to buy and own their own home. So you go from apartments to duplexes to single-family homes, or condominium units to single-family homes. So we think that it is in the public interest to do this type of housing.
I have a question. In the Rogers letter in paragraph 5, it's noted multifamily conditional use. It talks about the character of the neighborhood. These proposed duplexes don't appear on the surface to have the same character as the development that's next door.
By character, you mean,
Look, feel different, road pattern, everything's circular on one side, this is a straight line going in, and the buildings just, they don't match on the other side. And I noticed that in paragraph 5, he specifically calls out that multifamily would not be the character. Do you feel as though that these match the character of the neighborhood visually?
I do.
You do.
Yeah, I do. I think the fact that there are some short roads up in, that end up in a cul-de-sac, it might be a circular cul-de-sac, but it's a cul-de-sac. I think that in this instance, there really isn't the area to accommodate a cul-de-sac, so it has a T turnaround. But those are short roads with units close to each other as you go in, and even when you make cul-de-sac turnaround. So I think in that regard, it's very similar. The buildings are not large buildings. In fact, the footprint of these buildings is not so dissimilar to the footprint of each of the other buildings. There are 2 units side by side, but as you know, you went through Hickory Woods, some areas are very close together, some areas are farther apart. These are really eight units, 8 buildings.
Okay.
So I just have 2 questions. The first is, you mentioned that if it was workforce housing, you wouldn't need a zoning variance at all. Why not go for workforce housing then, so you wouldn't need a variance?
If you look at the simple answer is economics. If you look at the entry road to this project, because we have to get beyond the entryway to do anything, you got a long-distance road, and the cost of that road construction does not carry with workforce housing. It's plain and simple. It was looked at extensively. It just can't be done.
And what about, I know that being set back may be a challenge for some commercial uses, but, was there any effort made to evaluate the financial viability of that type of plan?
My client's been looking for commercial uses for a while. In fact, this sort of a side note, I was representing the developer of Hickory Woods condominium in opposition to a dog kennel that was proposed to go in. This was before the units were created. Because a dog kennel would not be the type of use that you want next to residential housing. There are other commercial uses of the same kind of nature that could fit in there that would not be as attractive as residential housing, and especially a low number of residents. That was the drawback to an apartment building, which is permitted. Could you fit an apartment building in there? Yes, you could. You could, but that's not really what the character of that neighborhood is.
Thank you.
But you wouldn't need a variance for a multifamily building.
Correct.
Any other questions from the board?
Which does speak a little bit to, if one's trying to identify the character, if it's a permitted use, it's the character, I guess. But we're saying that's not the character. We're saying what we're proposing is in accordance with the Hickory Woods condominium character, the other single-family house that's there.
I have a question for Nick or for planning. Was the development, the Hickory Ridge, was that a PUD?
That was before my time.
I don't think
Pardon me, before your time?
Yeah.
Okay. You have to meet the criteria of a PUD. I'm just wondering, acreage-wise, but.
You would have.
No, I agree with our chair that I struggled with the financial implications, but I'm not going to get into it more than that. I had the same thought you did. So.
Any other questions from the board?
This time.
Anything you'd like to add before we go out to the public?
No, thank you. No, thank you.
Okay.
I'll look forward to a rebuttal. Yes.
So we're now going to open it up to the public, and let me just give you a few ground rules and a little bit of an explanation of how that works. So first, we're going to call people who are in favor of the project, and they're going to come up to this microphone here, and you're going to say your name, and you're going to say your address, and then you're going to make your point in favor of the project. You say that to the board. So there's no crosstalk between the people at the podium, the applicant, anyone else. You're speaking through the board, and the board will respond to you, and if there are questions, we'll allow the applicant to rebut them. So the first group is going to be people who are in favor of the applicant. Is there anyone here who is in favor of the applicant and would like to speak at this time? Seeing none. So the second group is going to be people who are opposed to the applicant. And I will say this with respect to people who want to come speak in opposition to the applicant. I understand that there's a full house here tonight. There's, probably over 100 people here, and no one's going to tell you that you can't come up and speak. But the reality is that if you're going to make a point that someone's already made, there's no need to do that. There's going to be opportunities for everyone to speak, but, if someone makes a point that's the same point you were going to make, don't feel like you have to come up and make that point. We want to make sure that we keep it moving. The applicant's going to respond to, through the board again, the questions and the comments that are made, but it's not going to be something where one person's going to come up and say something and then the next person's going to come up and say the same thing. It's going to be, we're going to try to keep this moving forward so that everyone who comes up to speak is saying something new. The applicant will respond to it, and that way we'll keep things moving. So with that said, I would like to start off by reading a letter that was received just today to the Town of Londonderry Zoning Board of Adjustment regarding this case and case number 820-2025-6, which is the case, the sister case to this one that we'll hear next, depending on the result of this, from Daniel and Linda Kilgore, the Kilgore Living Trust, 2012, 17 Black Forest Circle, Londonderry, New Hampshire, date September 9th, 2025. As residents of Hickory Woods community here in Londonderry, New Hampshire, we strongly urge the Town Zoning Board of Adjustment to not approve the two requests for a variance as noted above. We feel that they would be very deleterious to the aesthetics and the market value of our community if the changes were made. Please vote no on these two items. If you require any additional information, please don't hesitate to contact us. And that it is signed by Daniel Kilgore and Linda Kilgore. Now, with that read, is there anyone else who would like to speak in opposition to the applicant? Please come up to the microphone here, state your name, state your address, and state your comment or question, please.
Sure. My name is Andy Sullivan. I'm an attorney for the board. I'm out of Bedford. The first thing I want to...
Sorry, Attorney Sullivan, could you just give me your office address?
24 Eastman Avenue, Bedford, New Hampshire.
Thank you.
The first thing I want to point out is consistent with the letter from Nick Codner. He points out that Table 4.1.2 for an underlying zone does not apply in this instance because it's superseded by Section 4.6.6.5. So all the references to it could be marketplace, it could be workplace, etc. It's not applicable. It's not applicable. Okay, what the performance zone section that it says the performance zone overlay district allows for uses that are consistent with the purposes and intent of an overlay district. Because not all uses permitted in the underlying zones are consistent with the performance overlay, the uses permitted in the overlay district are limited to those in section 4.6.6.5C. The uses permitted in the underlying zone districts are not permitted unless they're in that section below or considered a permitted by conditional use permit. So what's allowed and only what's allowed in this overlay district is business center development, professional offices, restaurants, cafes, similar things, retail stores or shops, computer services, religious institutions, educational institutions, recreation areas, and assisted living facilities. That becomes significant in relation to both the narrative provided by the applicant and the two letters from the Chet Rogers, the appraiser, because they both are predicated on at least his ability to do some sort of housing or multifamily or workplace. They're not. It's not. So that whole line of argument is without effect and should not be considered. What should be considered is what is allowed in the zone, and it's no residential at all. And that gets to the character of the neighborhood. Yes, Hickory Woods is next door, but what's Hickory Woods? It's detached, single-family homes, age-restricted, well-spaced, quiet. That is not what's being proposed. What's being proposed is 6 shoehorned-in duplexes in a very tight spot with no amenities whatsoever, and we don't know if any buffer at all, to the extent that the natural buffer, we don't know what it's going to be. As Attorney Hollis pointed out, they're going to try, but I represent developers like he does, and you don't know until you get in there. So there's not enough information, I believe, for the board to consider whether or not any buffer outside of 75 feet would be an adequate buffer, because you don't know what's going to be left over. It's inadequate information at this time, and they have not provided that. So in terms of the character of the neighborhood is you have this rather nice, quiet 55-plus enclave surrounded by woods, but across the street with the rest of the neighborhood is commercial. You got the big flea market, massive amount of traffic on Sundays. You got commercial up and down. The whole concept and purpose of the performance zone is to provide an extension of 102 to provide commercial. I live in Manchester, and there's probably like 3,000 condominiums have gone up in the last few years. Now some people are wondering what happens when the market shifts. There's a lot of spots to live, but it's got to be the places to work too. And that's the whole idea and the purpose of a commercial zone and the performance zone, to provide land area in this busy, high traffic road, which already is commercial, to have commercial space. And so I'm flipping around here, but in terms of the gain to the public, there's a loss to the public. You will lose needed commercial space on a commercial road. Secondly, new residential that's not age restricted will inevitably add to the school budget. Yeah, it will be taxes, but a commercial use will add to the tax base, but with no addition to the commercial. So there's a loss to the public if this is granted. But the big thing is, it's just a performance zone, and it's nothing that is being provided is allowed. So it is not a reasonable use. It's not just reasonable because it can fit. It's not just reasonable because it's needed a new housing like we all know in the whole country. It's reasonable according to the overall zone. And the zoning purpose is to provide health, safety, welfare for the town. Part of that welfare is the economy of the town, and they need commercial space. And so if you look at the plan, the rear of the 4 units, that's the edge of the 75 feet. So it's substantially, it's not even substantially into the 75-foot buffer. It is all in the 75-foot buffer. So that is also not consistent with the character of the neighborhood. It's so far into the buffer zone.
I apologize. May I just ask you for clarification on that point? You're talking about the 4 units that are on the left side,
correct,
and you're saying that those are the ones that are in the buffer.
They're entirely in the buffer.
Understood.
It might be an inch or two, but they can clarify any. But substantially, they're entirely in the buffer. So, in terms of the public interest, I posit to you, the public is seated behind us. As you pointed out, there's like 100 people in this room. Nobody is for this. The closest public that is impacted is sitting behind me. Nobody wants this. That's the public interest. They are members of the public. You can't say the public is necessarily segregated out so it's the rest of the town, but not the people that live here. That's not the public. This is the public, and they don't want this. They don't want this because it's not in the consistent character of their neighborhood. Their neighborhood is separated single-family homes, age-restricted. They have amenities. This is your typical shoehorn in the duplex condos, get as much as you can, and see you later. That's not in the best interest of the public. Plus, those power lines, and someone may speak tonight on power lines, they generate electromagnetic waves, which are not healthy. So if the public interest, health, etc. So it's not in the public interest to have this. It's not consistent with, if you look at what's the other purpose, this is the performance zone is to foster something that is consistent with the town objectives. And again, you're getting rid of commercial. In terms of so again, I already mentioned the tree remove. We don't know what's going on there. Eliminating the buffer will impact enjoyment of Hickory Woods amenities. They're concerned because it is there's no restriction on age or whatever. They're concerned it's almost like an attractive nuisance. Kids in that unit are going to want to go over and use the amenities. Now maybe they're kicked out. Maybe somebody's going to have to put up a fence, but it's natural. This is going to happen. There's nothing you can do to prevent that. And that's going to be a detriment to the use of their community. The value diminishes, really, because it's so distinct from what's there. What's there of Hickory Woods is a very nice, detached, single-family home. This happens to be a condominium, but it's really single-family home, widely separated. This is not. This is something that would go well more downtown, close to a more urban area because it's so tight. I haven't seen anybody posit a traffic report. I understand DOT provided a curb cut, but DOT provides a lot of curb cuts on very busy roads. Further on down 102, South Willow Street, all sorts of curb cuts, and the traffic is outrageous. There have been accidents on this road. You're going to have a 90-degree turn right in there. I'm sure there's sight distance, but still, typically, traffic count on any residence 10 cars per day times 12. That's 120 cars per day added to the mix coming right out of there. On Sunday afternoons, they're going to be interfering or interacting with flea market traffic, but there's no traffic study. Granted, that may be a planning board issue, but nonetheless, it goes to the overall health, safety, and welfare of the zoning ordinance. In terms of, again, character neighborhood, we address that. This is not consistent with the character neighborhood. It's contrary to the character. It's contrary to the commercial usage across the street. It's contrary to the nature of Hickory Woods as single-family detached, age-restricted. In terms of a spirit of the ordinance, again, the public interest spirit ordinance, many cases saying they're very related. So the same reason. It does not meet the spirit of the ordinance. In fact, it has a negative impact. In terms of the value, would I want to live in Hickory Woods someday? Yes. Would I want to live in a duplex sandwich inn like that? No. Okay. You generate that observation to the general scope of potential buyers. That's going to have a lower impact causation on Hickory Woods. I'm not saying that's right. I'm not making any moral judgment, but that's just the way reality is. It's going to negatively impact the value of Hickory Woods. In terms of hardship, there's absolutely no hardship here. I read you the list of things that are available for use by right. Okay, in one of the narratives provided by the applicant, he says, "Well, if it was commercial, it'd be less of a financial value." That doesn't matter. It can be used in its zoning usage and create a financial value. It may not be the optimum, but you're not here to guarantee the optimum use. You're here to say, is there any value there? Yes, there clearly is value there. Could be a number of things that will go on. So there's really no hardship. Yes, it's a uniquely located lot, but in the context of a commercial use, it's not so unique. Get access to a major commercial road. You got enough room to put without going into a separate anything else, you got enough room to put a commercial building up there. That's what the zone is designed for. It's no different than a lot of other small commercial lots here and there. You tuck something in, but it's doable. If you start taking away a commercial, where's the town going to build commercial use? The fact that it's surrounded by, on one side, you got the power lines part of the land and the conservation use, it's irrelevant. I mean, you still can fit a commercial use in there. So there's nothing a hardship here. And it's certainly, if in the context of the zoning, it's not presumed reasonable because it's not allowed, but it's not reasonable because it's a commercial use and it's fitted for a commercial use. Yes, it may not be a winner in terms of I'm going to make a lot of money in this, but there's money to be made in any commercial use. I can think of mezzanines going in there with commercial condos, and people want to go in there, and plumbers, electricians, stuff. They're always looking for that stuff. So the fact that it has to be residential to somehow juxtapose against its unique status, that's not the case at all. It's not the case at all. So a couple observations just for the record. Although I'm assuming, and anecdotally I believe, all the unit owners in Hickory Woods were noticed, but the board of directors per se, as the board of directors, was not noticed, nor its management. When I do things like this and I have condominiums that are butters, I notice every unit owner, and I send notices to the board of directors in the management company, because usually it goes to the management company, goes to the board of directors.
Does the board of directors own any actual of the units?
Yes, each member, but the board of directors as an entity.
So the board members did receive a notice.
I believe so.
Okay.
I believe so. But in the RSA 356B:3, Roman numeral 23, is strictly supposed to be noticed to the board of directors. That did not happen as an entity. Okay. So in terms of, it is not consistent with the public interest. In fact, it's clearly against the public interest. The spirit of ordinance, which is designed to provide commercial space, is not consistent there. A reasonable person looking at this would see that it's going to devalue Hickory Woods because of the nature of this. And it's getting rid of commercial space, which is needed. The character of the neighborhood is more commercial than it is residential. Just because it's next to a residential, you can't ignore everything across the street, everything down the street towards the town, everything up the street. All commercial. Okay? If anything, Hickory Woods is the anomaly. But everything else is commercial. The little house in front that's historic, there's always some historic house in the town. Sooner or later, somebody's going to buy that, rip it down, and put something up. So I don't think they met any of the criteria at all, and certainly they haven't met the hardship. It's impossible to meet the hardship, and they haven't met the spirit ordinance or the any of the other criteria.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Attorney Hollis, I'll let you respond before anyone else speaks.
Oh, thank you. I'm not going to get into a debate over the ordinance. I leave that to the town to interpret. They interpret what uses are. So let's just go on the arguments that Attorney Sullivan made, which is there's no hardship. You can use it for all those uses that he listed out: business center, restaurant, retail, religious, school, recreational. I give you the property, and you tell me that you can put any of those uses in there reasonably, and that they won't have a greater adverse impact on the Hickory Woods condominium than what's proposed here. We're talking about literally 6 buildings, 12 duplex units. This is not a major development. The hardship argument, I would disagree with Attorney Sullivan in that he knows that the law isn't what can you use it for what it's zoned for. That is the criteria that was abolished years and years ago. The criteria is A, is it unique? B, due to that uniqueness, is there any fair and substantial relationship for making it enforced against it? So, do we have a unique parcel? Yes. Is there any fair and substantial relationship to require all those types of uses that he listed? No. None of those uses belong there. They're not on the highway. They're not what the Performance Overlay District was set up for. You can look at the intent. Now, this is just one section of the Performance Overlay District, but it's the section of why the buffer is in there. It's 4.6.6.7 D1. Why do you have a buffer? You want to promote aesthetics between competing uses, between the commercial and the residential. That's why you want a buffer. So if you're going to put a commercial in, you need a buffer. They're anticipating commercial. That's not what is being proposed here, and that's why it's a reasonable use. You don't need to have buffers when the uses aren't competing. So I would disagree that hardship isn't satisfied. He's arguing under a very old standard which isn't there. In fact, even in the application, there's an A and a B. I've covered A, but B certainly is even more applicable. We don't have a reasonable use. None of those uses are a reasonable use of this property. You're talking about 12 units on 15 acres. I heard the word sandwich 4 times. I think that's a mischaracterization of what's being presented here. It's not sandwiched. You have 6 buildings on 15 acres of land. The loss to the public. Lost taxes, that's a pretty big generalization. I have presented studies, and I know they exist, that reflect on the number of bedroom units, 2 bedrooms less. These type of units or condominium units have very, very few children. I know planning boards don't believe it, but study after study has proven that that's the case. So to make a generalized statement that there'll be a loss to the public because the taxes from these buildings won't outweigh the cost, won't exceed the cost of school-aged children, is just a blatant statement with no support. That's an old statement as well. That's 20 years ago when nobody wanted housing, but we know that's not the case anymore. The power lines generate electromagnetic pulses. I would dare say Eversource would disagree that those power lines are going to generate a threat to these units. Again, a generalized statement. If it does, there are plenty of other houses, including the one right out front, which is right next door to it. And perhaps they should be prohibited from occupying there. The kids going across the street, I think that if there's a concern about that, that's a condition that comes up at the planning board level. What fences are you going to put in? Should there be fences? What landscaping are you going to put in? Should there be landscaping? That hasn't to do with the use. The use we're talking about is, again, 12 units, residential, duplex, not apartments, not townhouses, not big, residential homes. The traffic issues, there may be increased traffic on that road. Any use is going to increase the traffic. Whether there are impacts and whether they should be mitigated, it generally comes at the planning board level as well, as you know. I presented the DOT permit to reflect that the DOT has examined this site and determined that from a safety aspect, which is public safety, there is not an issue that traffic can go out that road because line of sight and adequate capacity in the roadway. That's how the DOT grants these permits. I think I presented all 5, and the fact that maybe there's a reference in there by the appraiser that uses that are permitted may not be permitted. I think that the general scope of it is you've got residential, There's not going to be an adverse impact, but there might be if it was commercial.
Thank you very much. So just so everyone's aware of how we'll proceed from here, people will come to the podium, they will speak, and then at the very end, I'll give Attorney Hollis another opportunity to rebut, so he's not going to have to respond to everything individually. So please come up to the podium if you'd like to speak.
Good evening. My name is Brian Wells from 8 Quarry Road. I have copies. Do you want these?
Copies of what?
What I'm going to say and diagrams I'm going to present.
We will take a copy of that, thank you. Okay, so just for the record, you handed me a single page front and back with writing on it with your name and address in the upper left-hand corner.
Yes.
And then you also handed me what appears to be 3, is it 2 or is it 3?
3 diagrams.
3 diagrams that go with that. I'm going to mark that one of the copies of that entire packet as Exhibit A, and that will go in the record. So you can begin when you see fit.
Okay. Well, again, thank you very much. Appreciate your time and this opportunity to express my opposition to granting these inappropriate variance requests. So I'm going to address the issues in the order that you go through, according to the 5 legal points. And start with, I believe the variance is contrary to public interest because safety risks will be created for future residents of the property. Property is inappropriate for the high-density development that includes children. There are a number of factors to consider. The property is surrounded by hazards to children. These include the Hickory Woods recreational facilities, the retention pond on the adjacent Hickory Wood property, the swamplands behind it to the north of the property, which I've walked many times. They're quite hazardous. And on the eastern side of the property, of course, you've got large swamplands that are pretty much impassable, and a busy highway to the south of the property. Children will be surrounded by hazards that will meet them if they wander from the developed portion of the property in any given direction. Given how dense the developed portion of the property, will be with 12 units, roads, parking areas, all crowded into less than 2 acres, which I'm going to show you in a diagram. Of buildable land, there will be little room for normal childhood activities. So I'm not sure if you show these diagrams, how do you do it?
So, are you referring to a specific diagram?
This one,
So you're referring now to the diagram that primarily is white. It's not the ones that have the blue background. It shows the 6 duplexes, and it has at the top less than 1.5 usable acres, 10 units on 1 acre.
yes. Is there a way to project this?
No.
No, okay.
Chairman, I make a suggestion, number these consistent, and then everybody, you will know number 1, number 2.
Yeah, they're gonna be Exhibit A, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I believe it's actually only 4 pages, but there's 5. The first page is front and back, so.
Okay,
continue.
well, I'll verbally describe the diagram. So it's similar to the diagram up there on the board, but it's a close-up of it. And what I've done is put a dark outline around the area that is restricted due to the wetlands. And these aren't my lines. These are the lines from the architect or the surveyor, whoever created this diagram, that shows it's very close to the buildings on all sides. And then I put on it, using the scale off the diagram, I put on it a 200 by 200 box, which you can clearly see all, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 of the 6 units are clearly within a 1 acre box. So I just want to make the point of how dense this is. And in order to fit those in, of course, they have no buffer whatsoever. It's a 0 buffer with the minimum 30-foot setback from the property line, which I'm going to address a little later. And on the opposite side, behind the 2 that are over here, you're directly into the wetlands. I mean, you're on the buffer area, and in some places the buffer is only 50 feet from this line that's been drawn here. In some areas it's 100. It seems inconsistent, but it bounces around. So, I want to get the point across of how dense this is. And then I provided another diagram. Okay, so this is
Okay, so this is the one marked Exhibit A2.
So on this diagram, what I tried to get across is the point of the inconsistency between these two. I can show you these if you want to see them. Thank you. The inconsistency between them. So what I've shown is I took a Google satellite picture and I cut out 3 of the units that are immediately adjacent on Church Lane there and reprinted them and just set them down on top. And you can see in the available space, there would be 3 Hickory Woods units. So if you take into account the fact you're going from 3 units to 6 and from single units to duplexes, it's basically 4 times the density of Hickory Woods. And so any argument that it's consistent, I think, is incorrect, fallacious argument. It's very inconsistent in the density and in the general character. So let me continue. As far as the safety goes, the property will not allow for entrance of a school bus. At least I wouldn't think so. So children will be picked up on 102 entrance. I've seen this happen before. It's nice that the speed limit got lowered to 45, but it's still a very high speed thing and fairly dangerous for children. And, you could have quite a number of children doing that. Okay, number 2, the spirit of the ordinance is not observed. The intent of commercial zoned areas separate commercial residential areas of the town. The variance places a residence in the location that is not appropriate. In addition, the property is in the 102 overlay, and that's, I guess, the whole issue today is, do you approve that in this overlay or not? But in general, that's not allowed in there. And so, I think the lawyer covered that better than I'm going to cover it. But, it seems like it violates the spirit, and we'll get more into this in the buffer, but in numerous points. When I read the zoning regulations, there's many, many points in there that are made that you want it this way, but no, we're going to do it that way. So, substantial justice. is not achieved by allowing for overdevelopment of the property. So an awful lot, I'm going to go off script here, and an awful lot of the argument today is it better to have residential than commercial? And none of the argument has been about, is it okay to have this density of residential? You know, it's just my personal opinion here. If it was only, 4 of the units, not 6, and if it was configured differently so there wouldn't be a buffer, or there would be the buffer, it would be a different story. But they've jammed them in so tight that, you've got a different argument than residential versus commercial. The argument is this density or more appropriate density. Anyway, yes, I don't see how, degrading our property, endangering children and all that so that he can make a profit is substantial justice. Okay, value of the surrounding properties. So this is a fairly complicated one. Will be diminished. So commercial property would, I'm somewhat arguing commercial versus residential, even though I think the argument should be different. But a commercial property would most likely be required to maintain a buffer. I mean, I can't imagine that you'd let them go to 0 buffer and stick a commercial in there. And I'm going to talk more about this visual buffer in a minute. The presence of a dense development with no buffer very close to our property line will reduce the property values for every unit in Hickory Woods. All prospective buyers tour the clubhouse and our recreational facilities before deciding to buy. That's common practice. Even small reductions in the value of 1 unit should be considered a large impact when multiplied by 98 units. And the one thing, I don't have a copy of my diagram here, but I gave you a third diagram.
Is it this one that starts property comparison in the upper right-hand corner?
Yes, that's it.
Okay. This is marked as Exhibit A, page 4.
Okay, so I'm going off memory on this, but...
Would you like a copy of it to go off of and
Oh,
just
yeah,
give
let
back?
me just... I want to make a number of points here and somewhat rebut some of the statements that have been made. So this is a Google Earth picture, and what I've designated on it is where the property line is as close as I can get it. So I went out there and measured it. From our recreational facilities, the property line's 52 feet away. They're proposing putting these units 30 feet from that property line. And so I've done a couple of things there. One is I've indicated, where that 30 feet is. That's the red line to the right-hand side of the white line. And what you can see is almost all of the trees are encompassed within that area there. But I went further than that. I went out there and I counted trees, and partly because the assessor made a statement, and I'll reread his statement here just to bring this back to mind. He said a substantial tree line buffer on the west side. And the point I want to make here is that I counted the trees on lot 25, that side of the property, and on Hickory Woods. 75 of the trees between the 2 white lines, there's a top and a bottom, which is the area of interest to us. 75 of those trees are on his side of the property. 29 of them are on our side of the property. So if you go and remove the 79 trees from his side, you're creating huge gaps in the supposed buffer that the assessor said, well, because you got a buffer, it's not going to have any impact. That's one thing. And 2, almost every one of our trees that is of any size is within 10 to 12 feet of the property line. So if you go not only take down all their trees, rip out all those roots, start putting septic systems in there, you're going to kill all the trees on our side. So the bottom line is this dense tree line you see here, and it's probably shown in his pictures, will cease to exist. I mean, what will exist is a berm with some evergreens on it. But if you're in our clubhouse, every one of those units will be clearly visible. And if you live in the house here, the closest house, you'll be staring right at the back of every one of those units. So the argument that it won't have any impact on us from that point of view, I think is pretty much absurd.
I'm sorry to cut you off. Are you done with that page?
Yes.
Can you bring it back to me, please, just
Oh,
so I have it for
yes.
the record? Thank you.
Oh, we got an extra here.
Thank you.
Okay, I want to continue on 4B. If you were to consider a commercial property versus residential, it would typically be fenced in area, which they do for their own safety and property protection. Whereas, that would avoid people using the property from crossing into the swampy areas or going across the property line in Hickory Woods. This would reduce the potential liability that the residents of Hickory Woods face with the variance, if the variance is allowed and children are exposed to hazards of the Hickory Woods property, which means the retention pond, the recreational facilities, and the swamps to the north. So there are large swamps that are on our property, which are very close to this property. I mean, none of these diagrams show that, but if you go to the back corner of their property, there's a huge swamp there. That's ours. Yeah, it's not on the picture, but it's where the north-south arrows are right there. That's all swamp and wetlands. Let's see. Mr. Vision has said, at least to our board president, that he will not fence the area. So what this requires then is the Hickory Woods residents would have to place a fence along the property line for safety and liability purposes. I mean, this is likely to cost more than $10,000 given the large extent of it, which would come out of our capital reserve fund. And clearly diminishing a capital reserve fund on a condominium directly reduces the assets and the value of the property. Anybody buying a condominium should be looking at what the reserves are. So commercial use of the property would most likely operate only during normal business hours, which would also reduce the impact on the neighbors. So point 5, this hardship thing. Literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance will not result in unnecessary hardship. So it costs very little to purchase this property in 2003, which is a matter of public record. It was one part of 2 parts purchased. And I would note, this isn't in the words I've written down, but I would note that this problem that we're addressing today is of Mr. Vision's own making. He owned both pieces of property, the one with the house on it and this one. They were sold to him together, but as separate transactions, and he chose to separate them.
I apologize. When you say the house on it, do you mean the house that's
The Evans' house.
the Evans' house that's on 102 that's kind of surrounded by this
Yes.
property?
Yeah, those are both owned by Mr. Vision.
Okay.
But anyway, he's been sitting on this property for 22 years, which clearly indicates that holding it is not a hardship to him personally. His loss from denial of this variance is only the time and effort it should take to find a suitable use for the property. So I'd just like to add a couple of notes here. So our real issue is the density and the proximity to our property. It's not necessarily residential versus commercial, but if it was one versus the other, there are many commercial things that we'd rather see in there, and we could debate all of that. So I don't know here if we talk about, I have other things to talk about when we get to the buffer.
We don't talk about the buffer here because the buffer's not before us yet.
Okay, so I just want to say one other thing, or address other things related to safety. So people have talked about traffic and those sort of things, and I brought it up here in the other area, but what nobody has mentioned is that Hickory Woods roads are private. We have to maintain them. We plow the snow there. In the winter, it's all up to us to take care of it. And this neighborhood, I mean, it's essentially guaranteed that these people will be cutting through Hickory Woods to get to West Road. I mean, any reasonable person would do it. So you are going to be putting more traffic onto the Hickory Woods private roads. It adds liability for us. If somebody comes and has an accident there, what are they going to do? Sue us because we didn't properly plow the roads. Because we're a 55-plus community, we don't plow the roads like you plow the roads. Right, our roads and driveways may not get done for hours and hours because that's how we save money, by not having to have them continually plowed over and over again. So there is a safety and a risk from that point of view. Plus, I personally and many of the residents here walk those streets. I walk twice a day up and down those streets. You add more traffic, it's more of an issue. People in the neighborhood that live there are very respectful and drive slowly. But you get outsiders going through, you know, they're in a hurry, it's going to be a whole different story. And we're not in a position to enforce speeding laws in Hickory Woods. So there is a safety aspect that goes directly to us, maybe not to the general public. The state may say it's fine to have the road, but you have to consider we have our own unique situation here. And I think that's all I had on this topic.
Thank you, Mr. Wells.
Good evening, how are you?
Good evening.
My name is Paul Ramsey, and I live at 24 Pepper Hill Road, Londonderry, New Hampshire, in the Hickory Woods complex. I just have a few items that I'd like to address. One question I have is, one of the zoning ordinances requires a review by the Conservation Commission, and that report filed with the zoning board. Has that happened?
So I'm not aware of that being a requirement, and I haven't seen that typically in any case. I don't know specifically what you're referring to, but the Conservation Commission is a separate body in town. I don't know if it would have jurisdiction or any reason to be involved in this case.
It's zoning ordinance 4.6.1.8. Any variance or appeal to the Zoning Board of Adjustments shall be in accordance with NSH, New Hampshire RSA 676.5 and section 8.1 of this ordinance. Prior to holding a public hearing on the appeal or variance to the zoning board, holding a public hearing on an appeal or variance, the zoning board shall forward a copy of the plan and application form to the Conservation Commission for review and comment. The Conservation Commission shall, after reviewing the plan and application, forward any appropriate recommendations to the Zoning Board of Adjustments for their consideration. And I ran that by the code enforcement officer, and they agreed.
So I have never seen that in any case. I don't have Conservation Commission notes in this case. So can anyone tell me what the reason is for
I
that?
can give you a copy of what's on the Londonderry website.
Oh, I can read it.
Oh, okay.
I was asked about that recently,
Yes.
and I looked it up, and it's in our zoning ordinance.
Okay. So I do not have a copy of that and have not received a copy of that here.
Okay. I think Brian addressed the fact that there's not an assumption that Hickory Woods prefers residential residential units versus commercial. We'll just stop there. Relative to the assessor, in his report to you saying that there's no impact on values, the pictures show all the trees, not the trees after they've been cut down. So I just want to point that out. Question we have is, are there going to be decks on the back of these units? You go 20-foot deck or 30 feet deck, well, how does that apply to the whole situation? We don't know. And finally, in 1978, I finished a 43-year career with Public Service Company in New Hampshire, now Eversource. I also held many positions in the company during those 43 years.
So sorry. Did you say you finished your career in 1978?
Yes. I retired in 1978.
Okay.
Excuse me.
No,
Oh, you're saying 1978.
I'm sorry. 2018.
I apologize. I was just going to say.
Thank you.
I was going to say, you look unbelievable.
That's what I was
but
going to say,
please.
too, yeah. I don't know what you're doing.
I'm sorry.
No, no, no.
2018.
Absolutely.
2018.
I'm so sorry. Please continue.
43-year career in 2018. And in that span, I held a variety of positions, including Vice President of Operations, which included the construction, operating, and maintenance of high-powered transmission lines. And so I also want to disclose, in full disclosure to this committee, that I am on the Utility Committee for the town of Londonderry, with Lynn Wiles as the chair. So they've invited me to join that committee once they found out I retired. One of the things I'd like to point out is EMF. This is electric and magnetic frequencies. Some say it doesn't exist. My career says something different. I worked on the Northern Pass project. That was a project to bring more Canadian power into New England. One of the big issues there for all the towns along New Hampshire was EMF. They wanted the whole power line buried because of things like EMF. We have recently had another utility, National Grid, propose similar kind of line. Would end up here in Londonderry just recently. They even received federal funding to help support that project. They too faced the EMF issue, and in 2024 pulled the whole project and killed it. So it's a reality. And what is unique about this particular right-of-way, if you look at it, which is very different than most right-of-ways that I've worked with, is there are 5 high-powered transmission lines on this right-of-way. You normally don't see that many lines lined up next to each other. When aggregated together, it could be well over 1 million volts. The proposed duplexes are just several hundred feet away from these power lines. Studies have shown or indicated that EMF and power lines have been associated with childhood leukemia, other forms of cancer, so forth and so on. I'm just having a little difficult time to understand how this board could approve a variance that might endanger the health of families and children in the future. Equally, what if you grant it and at some point in the future the town is now sued for people's health because of the power lines? That's something in the future that you might want to consider. Is that unreasonable? No, in my career I've seen it. So I just wanted to share that with you, that there is a health factor associated with this variance. And those are my comments.
Thank you very much.
Paul, the closest power line's 100 feet away.
Gentlemen.
Yep.
The closest power line is 100 feet away, so
Thank you.
I didn't walk it.
Anyone else with comments who would like to speak? Seeing none, Attorney Hollis, I will give you a chance to rebut all that's been said.
Well, there was a great deal of discussion by Mr. Wells about density, and I'm not quite sure what the definition of density in his mind was, although we can talk about acres and number of units, I think, to get into density. I believe his reference to density was buildable area and number of units per buildable area. And that's really not what density is, because this lot is 15 acres. Now, some of it's wet, some of it's not greatly accessible, some of it's in buffer areas, all of which is the same for Hickory Woods. Hickory Woods is 66 acres, 98 homes, but as stated tonight, a great deal of it is wetlands. There's a substantial piece. Some of it is, there's a utility easement for a tower, speaking of EMFs. So density, it's not fair to have it both ways, saying we have a very spread out development, lots of open space, and we're not dense, but on this site, all of your open space doesn't count towards the argument of density. So I would argue that you can't conclude that the density of this project is 12 units on 1.5 acres. It's 12 units on 15 acres. So if you look at the density, the abutting on the screen that's called up now is pretty clear, gives you a pretty good example. Number of units, areas where there's wetland, those wetlands counted towards the density calculations. So you have a great deal of acreage, and we're going to put 15 units. I also think you look at his exhibits, which I would call, I think it's A1. It's kind of informative here. Hickory Woods unit width is 42 feet, whereas the proposed duplexes are only 38 feet.
So I don't mean to cut you off, Attorney Hollis, but I marked the page, the written page
that's
as
one?
A1, so it's A2 I believe you're
A2.
talking about.
Thank you. So A2 has the comparison. Unit width, Hickory Woods is 42, and the lot 25 width is less than 42. So that's 2 units in a smaller building. Residents per unit, 1 to 2, that's a statement of fact. Separations, 30 to 24, pretty close, pretty much the same. Setback from the road is 30 versus 20. Again, that's setback from, a very private road for 12 units, not setback from a road of 98 units. Parking spots, I'm not sure, other than they have more asphalt than is proposed on this project. So maybe that's more favorable. I think it gets back down to, density is not a fair argument. What's a fair argument is usage. Usage is what we're here for. We would like to use it for residential, for units, buildings that are slightly smaller in size than the Hickory Woods buildings, but have 2 units, not 1, which would be indicative they're not going to be large family occupancies, going against their argument of tax problems. Fencing is an issue of the planning board, as I've said many, many times. It's argued before the planning board, and many times the applicant agrees to fencing, or the planning board makes it a condition. That may come up if it gets to the planning board. Cutting through Hickory Woods to get to West Road, I didn't quite gather that, but I think the proposal is people coming out, that is the unit occupants of 12 units coming out onto Nashua Road, will accelerate into Nashua Road, then decelerate to go on to the various spine roads in the Hickory Woods, and then end up on West, as opposed to going straight down Nashua Road, turning right at the light, which you can make a right-hand turn on, and going up West Road. And I acknowledge that it's a shorter distance, but at the layout, it was purposely designed to prevent that and avoid that, and I think you can see for yourself that's not really the greatest of decisions if that's where you're going. I think if I understood it, the concern is about, on the fencing, is that there will be children playing that might come over and play on the amenities and facilities or property of Hickory Woods. And again, I think that's a planning board issue and a concern that might be raised if and when this gets to the planning board. Mr. Ramsey raised the point about the referral to the Concom, and I think that's generally a staff referral, but I don't know the answer to that. And if this board feels that it ought to be tabled until you hear from the Concom, then so be it. We have no objection to that. The values as to the trees versus no trees, as I've said, if no development is occurring out there, it's within the property owner's rights to cut any trees on their property that they want, just as Hickory Woods could cut their trees. They may choose not to, but they could, unless there's any restriction imposed by the planning board at the site plan level, which this would have to go through, or imposed by the zoning board. We're not proposing to take them down, but as we've indicated, and as is agreed by Attorney Sullivan many times, these things happen, and I agree with him. The best plans don't always occur. So we could plan to keep them, but it doesn't mean that they would all survive. The utility lines, I would note that in the Northern Pass case, I don't believe Eversource ever made a statement that there was an EMF problem. In fact, that was their position, contrary to the residents' position. So I think it's debatable. I think there have been many people trying to prove that, and very few have. I don't know that there's any relevance to a statement that there may be EMFs coming off of that power line, which is 100 feet away from the proposed residence, and therefore 150 to 170 feet away from the residence at Hickory Farm. Anyway, those are my rebuttal points, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Back to the board. Any further questions for the applicant? Seeing none, we will go into deliberations. Does anyone want to talk about it in detail, or do you want to go straight to the 5 points?
Nobody wants to weigh in. I'm just gonna say that I think the buffer is a separate case.
Correct.
And fencing and trees and all that are really a planning board decision, or, other means of accessing the site. The reason we're here for this case, in this case, is to decide whether the request by the petitioner to get a zoning variance on the commercial use to be residential, correct?
So it's duplexes specifically, because
Right,
elderly
correct.
housing is allowed in the PUD.
Senior, age-limited housing is allowed, workforce housing is allowed?
Workforce housing, I don't believe.
I don't
is,
believe so, only by,
But that was
That was a subject of sort
some
of
debate. Yes.
Nick, do you know what the answer to that question? I'm sorry. Do you know the answer to that question?
Workforce housing is permitted, and multi-housing is permitted by conditional use.
Okay. Sorry.
including duplexes.
Duplex is not considered multi-housing.
That's what I wanted to clarify.
Right. Duplex is.
So they want to build an apartment building, they wouldn't be here. They want, or they're conditional use. They wanted to build workforce, they wouldn't be here, or conditional use, right? So the only thing we're really looking at is there a strong case for why has the petitioner, in my mind, made enough of a strong case that there's no other potential uses for this property in a commercial way, only for these 6 duplex units for a total of 12 housing units. Is that correct?
So for the first case, the issue is duplexes. There are certainly uses for the property that are not duplexes. They are primarily commercial.
I understand.
Yes.
I think-
So that's correct.
So that is the reason
think
that
the-
we're here to go ahead.
I think the question isn't, is it the only possible use, but did they make enough of a case that we
That's
should
what I
grant
meant.
the
Right.
variance
We're saying the same
for
thing.
that use? Okay.
And,
Okay, just a
and
different
I would
way.
say, before I go to the 5 points, that I personally am uncomfortable adjudicating as to whether or not what was possible or not possible, what's financially feasible, why building a road that I'm in a business, sort of, I can't judge based on that. The petitioner has made a decision to go for this application, and this is what we're looking at. Regardless of the financial factors, or what's feasible, or what's affordable, or what's going to make a profit, that's not what we're here to discuss, right?
So the issue of reasonable use, it relates to basically, can you make a reasonable use of the property that's different than what's there based on specific conditions of the property that are unique to it? Correct.
Correct. I mean, it's a unique property for sure, but I can't say I personally, because I was having a discussion before we go to the 5 points, that I'm convinced or I'm comfortable judging what's financially feasible or not. That's not, regardless of the appraiser's letter.
Well, we didn't see anything that said,
Yeah.
this commercial property is not feasible. This commercial property couldn't happen. It's just that it may not be as economically
No, I understand.
advantageous.
That's what we're saying, the same thing.
Yes, we are.
One of the other things, if we're going to have the conversation, is I was looking at the Google map to try to figure it out, and I'm familiar with that area. I mean, there's the big condo development behind it that we've been talking about a lot tonight, but much of it is commercial in that area. Now, 6 houses off the road that you may or may not see, does that alter a character? I don't know, but that is mostly a commercial area from my perspective.
Well, it's directly across from the flea market.
Right.
Yeah.
Which I go to regularly.
But there's other commercial businesses up and down the
Oh,
street.
no, I'm
And
agreeing.
and that's one reason I asked whether the residential development that these nice folks are from was a PUD or was it how it came to be. Definitely predates my time and apparently Nick's and other people's, but I don't know that saying that this is next to that development somehow makes building housing there okay or not okay. I don't see that as a reasonable argument, frankly, so.
Well, I think it's a reasonable argument. I think the issue is, are you looking at the character of the neighborhood as, obviously, if you zoom in and you just say on that side of the road, there's one residential, this is this is residential, Hickory Hill. But across the road is the flea market. Further down is Sweets Landscaping. This is all coming towards Hudson. To the south, I guess west of this, those are all commercial. So it is all kind of in the eye of the beholder. What is the neighborhood, and is it specifically what's around it, or do you kind of zoom out a little bit more?
You mentioned character of the neighborhood. Just, and there's been a lot of conversation on it. I had asked a question initially about it. I can't kind of get past that one. It to me, all of the testimony here tonight, the structures are different. Everything about this is different than the neighborhood that's next door. And I think that when we talk about separated, the testimony was separated single-family homes, age-restricted with amenities. This, if that's the character to the left, this is not the character to the right. If we look at the structures to the left, that's not the character to the right. If we're talking about putting in nearly a four-way intersection on 102, that's a significant impact. I don't need a traffic study to tell me on that road that that's a significant impact to this neighborhood. So when we start talking about bringing trees down, and I look at some of the houses that are on Church Lane, and we don't have a clear answer, or we don't have an agreed upon answer if this was to proceed, how many trees would be coming down? Because I do understand that both sides have agreed that in development, maybe they all come down, and maybe 75% come down. I think we have residents on Church Lane that are staring at Route 102 from the back of their house. So if we're talking about significant impacts to that neighborhood and potential significant impacts, I'm having a tough time getting by that one. And the last part is, in every way, shape, or form, personally, I feel like it's sandwiched. I think that word was an appropriate use, and when I look here, it's a unique property, and I do think that if these structures went in and we took an aerial 10 years from now and compared this to what is existing, it would, one, look sandwiched, and number two, it would look like it didn't belong. Okay. Those are just my comments.
Nope. Thank you very much. Anyone else with some discussion before we go to the 5 points? Good. Okay. Granting the variance would or would not be contrary to the public interest because?
I would say it's contrary to public interest.
Yeah, I agree. I think that regardless of, well, I shouldn't say regardless. There is residential nearby, but I think that the character of the neighborhood on 102 is primarily commercial. And I think that's...
I agree. I do think it would alter the character of the neighborhood.
I agree.
Agreed.
Lisa?
Agree.
Spirit of the ordinance would or would not be observed because?
I would say it's not observed.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's kind of a mirror of one.
I agree as well. I mean, it's similar, but it just feels like it's, as mentioned earlier, the addition of yet another street in that rapid road, the closeness of the area, the closeness of various things around would not necessarily, might violate some health, safety, and welfare.
I also agree.
Agree.
I agree.
Granted, the variance would or would not do substantial justice because? I would say would not. I think there's a greater loss to the public than there is a gain to the applicant.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree as well.
I would agree with that.
Agreed.
Agreed.
That's a commercial area, we lose the opportunity for commercial, the budding residents are potentially harmed by this, I would agree.
For the following reasons, the values of surrounding properties would or would not be diminished.
I would say they would be diminished.
What do you say it?
I would say they would be diminished.
But why?
I would say because of the proposed development and how it's laid out and what the neighbors would incur because of that. Now, we don't have any other knowledge of any proposed commercial developments or any other developments. We have to only judge what's put before us, right, Mr. Chair?
Correct.
So,
I would agree.
I disagree.
You disagree?
You do.
Okay.
Disagree also based on the testimony that was provided and the evidence that was provided, especially from the appraiser. I'm not so sure we can make that leap on that number.
Okay. I agree with Lisa and John.
I changed my vote. I would agree with Lisa and John. And you.
Okay.
All right, well, then I'll agree.
The only evidence on it that was hard evidence was the appraisal reports, and the appraisal report supported that the values would not be decreased.
We don't have to rely on just those, but all right, I'll change as well.
Owing to special conditions of the property that distinguish it from other properties in the area, denial of the variance would result in unnecessary hardship because there is or is not a fair and substantial relationship between the general public purpose of the ordinance provision and the specific application of that provision to the property because I would say there is.
I would say there is. Well, I think the property is somewhat unique. It would still, it doesn't show, they did make a showing that the ordinance should not apply to that.
I agree with that. I believe the property is certainly unique.
I would agree with that.
Agreed.
You agree?
I agree the property is unique, but I don't think there is an unnecessary hardship.
I agree with that. Is everyone?
I
on
agree
board?
with that as well.
Yes, okay.
Primarily because I think that the ordinance should apply anyway.
Well, there are other options, building options for that parcel.
That's what we mentioned
Right.
earlier, correct. Now, what they are, we don't know because those were put before us.
The proposed use is or is not a reasonable one because?
I guess it's not in this case where this is a commercial
I
zone.
agree with that.
I agree with that.
Agreed.
Lisa?
Well, I'm on a tough time with this one.
Okay.
Don't abstain.
I know, no abstaining.
No abstaining, that's right.
I think it's reasonable,
Okay.
because it's residential, right next door to residential. And on both sides, actually, because there's that single-family house right there. Yes, the surrounding area is quite commercial. But I think it's reasonable.
Okay.
It's always good to have someone think differently. So.
No, it is, especially. Okay. Do I have a motion?
I guess I'd like to make a motion in case number 08-20-2025-7 to deny the motion for the request for a variance.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Who was the second?
John. So in case number 8-20-2025-7, the request for a variance was denied. my question to you now is, do you wish to withdraw the second variance request, or would you like to go forward?
No, we're going to withdraw because it's tied to this use.
Okay.
So, since the use was denied, we are not going to proceed with that at this time.
Okay, so for case number 8/20/2025-6, the request for a variance from 4.6.6.7.d.4.d.1, that request has been withdrawn.
Withdrawn without prejudice if we
Withdrawn
change
without
the
prejudice.
application. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. We'll take a 5-minute break or a 10-minute break. We'll come back at 9:05.
Yeah, I agree. Assuming our other cases here. another cookie after.
That goes in there.
You need a sugar rush.
Yeah.
You need a sugar rush.
Well, when I was traveling last month, I changed my eating habits are different when you're on.
(3.H.1) to allow the pre-existing non-conforming paved area to remain in the perimeter green area. Parcels located at 5 Ricker Avenue in the Industrial 2 zoning district, tax map 28, lot 22-23. Epic Properties LLC owner, the Dubay Group, Inc. applicant.
Gentlemen.
Good evening.
Evening. State your names and addresses.
So my name is Doug McGuire. I'm an engineer with the Dubay Group, here representing the applicant, Epic Properties. This is Kurt Holston, the owner of Epic Properties. So we're here tonight to...
Interrupt you 1 second.
Sure.
He's speaking on your behalf.
Yes, yes.
Thank you. It wasn't a form.
No problem. So in your packets, you should have 2 sheets, one of an existing conditions plan of 5 Ricker Avenue, as well as a proposed site plan. So just to give the board a little bit of background, if we can, yeah, that's, so the existing conditions here, this is the property as it sits today. So we have an existing commercial building, some existing pavement area that dead ends to the rear of the property with its access off of Ricker Ave, and the rest of the property is essentially grass, dirt, undeveloped portion. So we had come forward to the town in a design review application to propose an expansion to the undeveloped portion of the property, which is to the south of the existing building, right-hand side of the property. I don't know if we could pull up the site plan real quick, Chris.
That's the next sheet.
So next sheet down. Perfect, thank you. So we're proposing, as you can see, a 4-unit commercial building to supplement the existing building on the property. We're adding a secondary access point and associated parking and infrastructure to support that building. All of the applicable zoning requirements are met as part of this proposal, meaning our perimeter setbacks, our building setbacks, our front setbacks, our landscape buffers, everything that would be applicable to this new building is intended to be met as part of this proposal. The reason we're here tonight is because when we submitted this, it was brought to our attention that a portion of the existing pavement on the existing building is within the green space buffer. We don't disagree with that, and I understand where Mr. Connor is coming from on that determination that that would be essentially non-conforming with the current regulations. However, our position is that this pavement has been there since the late 70s, early 1980s. So an incredibly long time. It's all verified by Google Images going back on the property. And so this particular area, we are not proposing any improvements whatsoever to. We are not touching that portion of the property in any way besides connecting for circulation purposes along the rear of the building. But none of that parking area is going to be altered or expanded in any way. So from way I understand your ordinance, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but this pavement is essentially a pre-existing non-conforming use. It was in place prior to the green space requirements that came from what I could tell in reviewing your ordinance back in the mid-90s, 95. It looked like that was started to be where they started bringing in some buffer requirements into the commercial and industrial zones. So because we're not touching that area in any way, the part of your ordinance that allows for pre-existing non-conforming uses to remain as long as they are not A, expanded, B, destroyed and then rebuilt after a certain amount of time. And I think there's one other category which I could bring up if I had it right in front of me. But essentially, we feel that we fall into that category where this pavement is pre-existing. We recognize it's non-conforming, but we're not expanding it. We're not altering it in any way. And all the improvements that we are doing on the property fully conform to your ordinance. So for that reason, we feel that the determination of this requiring a variance is not warranted in this particular case, and so therefore we're here to appeal that decision.
Very good. Any questions? Oh, I don't have anybody?
I don't know.
Does anyone feel we need to move any further than we might do a different kind of?
So we
Different
do,
form,
we
Madam
have,
Chair.
we have interpret.
Different form for this.
Yeah, it's interpretation of the administrative body in question, interpretation of the applicant seeking relief, and then findings by the board. Yep.
Before we continue, am I still voted in?
Ooh.
You're back.
So,
Since you're back, we need to.
so it was John and Lisa, so it's up to you if you want it to be Lisa still or John or Christine.
Lisa, you've been here longer,
A little bit.
Oh, yeah.
so we'll keep Lisa.
I got booted.
Lisa's still appointed as a voting member and John as an alternate. We need a little guidance on this one. I have no problem agreeing with the argument here that it is a prior non-conforming and that, go ahead, Nick.
That's not a question of pre-existing non-conforming. This is a new site plan, and a new site plan has to meet all of the conditions, site plan regulations. 674-39 states that. Is there any substantial changes to a site plan? And you can compare the two site plans, the existing to the new. It states that if there's substantial changes, then there is no grandfathering in it.
Can you repeat that, Nick?
Mike?
I got the statute right
Yes.
there.
Mm-hmm.
674-39.
So Nick, if they weren't doing this, if they weren't adding this new building, we wouldn't be here, because it wouldn't.
If it was a
It would be same
minor,
old, site
if
plan.
it were, say, a minor site plan, then that would be one thing, but this is not a minor site plan. This is a new site plan.
Correct.
And they have to meet all of the conditions required for a new site plan.
Is that the section that they're seeking relief from?
But they're seeking relief from both the same zoning ordinance in terms of pavement. One is just challenging the administrative ruling, and then the other is if we vote no, then they want a variance, is what it is.
Right. So they're saying that they don't need a variance. They're challenging my administrative
So
decision.
what's the section that you're referring us to for this one?
674-39. It's in RSA.
RSA.
Yeah, it's the statute.
What page are you on? Page?
So I am on,
674.
I'm on 674-39, it's page 437.
Thank you.
Would you mind reading where I have the red arrows pointing on that?
I can read those two sections. So this is in notes to decision under the statute. It cites the Harborside Associates versus City of Portsmouth case for the following. Any development pursuant to a site plan amendment that substantially changes the plan is by definition not in accordance with the terms of the original approval, and therefore clearly does not fall within the protection of the exemption under RSA 674-39. Accordingly, seeing no ambiguity in RSA 674-39, the court declined to apply the administrative gloss doctrine. Second point. While the terms of a site plan approval cannot sensibly be treated as absolute, as this would deprive developers of any flexibility to make even incidental changes, RSA 674-39 exempts from subsequent changes to zoning ordinances only amendments to approved site plans that do not alter the development to such an extent that it is no longer in accordance with the terms of the original approval. Therefore, an amendment can no longer be said to be in accordance with the terms of a previously approved site plan if it substantially changes that plan. Whether an amendment constitutes a substantial change from the terms of the site plan's original approval necessarily turns upon the facts and circumstances of a particular case.
Don't you agree that the second one there has to do with whether it's an amendment or not?
I think it's the first one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
We don't have the actual decision, Nick, in our packet?
His denial letter?
Yeah.
Right.
Did you have that?
No. No, it must have been.
I do, yes.
Thank you.
Sure. I just have the one copy, unfortunately.
So this does not, it just says, the reason for the denial is the parking encroaches into the required 15-foot green area. Police circle owner court feels it was relief of administrative decision. Cites that same 4413H1 that is
But this is a new site plan that they're submitting. It's not site plan amendment or even an administrative adjustment.
May I add something, Madam Chair?
An amendment that substantially changes the plan. It's not a site plan.
If I could just add, I mean, I think obviously this is the differing of opinion between Mr. Connor and myself. He's looking at any change to a plan that would then eliminate any grandfathered rights because it's a new plan. However, your regulations, section 8.2, existing nonconforming uses, allow for nonconforming uses of land or buildings to continue in their present use, except any nonconforming use or building may not be changed to another nonconforming use, reestablished after discontinuance for 1 year, except when such use or building conforms to the provisions of the ordinance, expanded, rebuilt after damage exceeding 75% of the value. So I guess what I'm looking at is if we were expanding the site and touching that parking in any way, utilizing that, expanding that non-conforming area, I would agree with Mr. Connor that that would require relief. But the only thing we're touching on this property is on the opposite side of an existing building and an existing parking area, which is not being touched in any way, and we're complying fully with the new work that we're doing adjacent to this property. So it seems to me that it would not be appropriate that you would have to seek relief for an existing non-conforming piece that has been in place for over 50 years simply because you're altering another portion of the property which has no impact, no material impact whatsoever on that nonconformity. We can't enhance it. It's not like we're expanding it or touching it. So for that reason, I really don't think it applies. And I think that the board could hang their hat, so to speak, on your section that allows you to maintain existing non-conforming uses of properties. And in this case, we're using that green space buffer area for parking and have been well before it was a requirement to be 15 feet.
Did this plan go in front of the planning board for approval and that's when it got tagged?
No, we are in the design review process. We've gone through several iterations. This piece came up at some point during that design review process.
I have a question. Can we pull up a Google map of this location?
So just to be clear, well, go ahead. I'm
Can
sorry.
we get the street view by any chance? Okay, so if I'm understanding this correctly, the area, this parking area here is to remain
Correct.
in the building, and then you're proposing to build an additional parking area on the other side of that building, and then a new building beyond that?
So that's correct. So if you were to rotate the image to the right, keep going.
So where that
So
truck is.
yeah,
is
so
gonna be-
that area, that's part of this property. It's open vacant area, and as you can see, so that area is usable. And of course, we proposed something that didn't require any relief within that area as part of this new proposal. If we could go back to the left, Kristen, again, please. So this area, again, we don't really have any ability to alter anything in that area because you have an existing parking area that's supporting an existing building, both of which are proposed to stay. They're not being altered in any way. So my argument is I don't see why, just because we're modifying an existing property with something that's fully conforming, not making it anything more non-conforming, that all of a sudden now any grandfathered right that someone had has to immediately be eliminated or require relief. Obviously, the board would be inclined probably to grant such relief, but my thought is I applied for the administrative relief because I think that it would be helpful for this board to, in cases such as this, set that. Because if you have an area that is not being touched in any way, and just because, if he wanted to pop a gazebo and some picnic tables on his other side to support his employees and add a new driveway, let's say, he shouldn't have to adjust his parking that's been there for 50 years, is my I guess, argument.
So can I ask a question? Yeah. No, go ahead. Well, go ahead.
So we don't set precedent here. We are not a court. So our
Understood.
decision in your thing is unique to yours, and I don't want anyone to think that it's somehow going to unilaterally apply to every situation that comes in front of us. We're talking about a very small, I'll use the word de minimis amount of area here that has been here almost as long as I've been here. I think I beat it by a year moving to Londonderry. So I don't see a huge impact here.
Yeah, I don't either. And I guess just to clarify, because I think the street view and the Google Earth view are very helpful. How many spaces would you be losing if you had to comply?
Essentially, all the spaces
that are on the left side
don't comply by about 5 feet. So you're cutting those. I guess you could turn them to parallel spaces, but it would be a significant
because
reduction.
you're parking in the right of way.
Not in the right of way.
I mean setback. I'm sorry, in the green
Correct.
space setback.
Correct.
Yeah.
I think you're
Doing for 50 years. You think I'm wrong?
I think you're going right into the next case where you're asking, what would you be losing? The question now is whether he is required to apply for a variance.
No, I understand that, but I just want to understand what he was going to be losing. I think I totally get that. Yeah.
Are these two separate buildings? So they're not attached?
That's correct. And so, and that's really the crux of my argument, is that we are expanding the site, but we are not expanding the nonconformity in any way. And so when you go to that section 8.2, you're not altering, you're not expanding, you didn't get destroyed or removed and not redo it in a certain amount of time. So the use of that green space area, which predated the setback requirement, we're not touching that. And so it shouldn't require relief just because we're putting a building somewhere else on the property. If we were touching that in any way, expanding it, adding more spaces, that's a different story.
I agree.
And you're not changing the use.
And we're not changing the use.
Change your use.
This section here does not convince me that they need to do anything. However, when we go into prior non-conforming, I do need to take a peek at that because I think if you're going into, maybe it's, the prior non-conforming section is 6. Can you recite that to me again?
Excuse me? Oh, section 8.2 of your ordinance is existing non-conforming use. To my knowledge, it's the only section of your ordinance which talks about existing non-conforming uses.
Believe that the request falls under the existing non-conforming use of 8.2?
Read it.
Yeah.
You read faster. Me too.
You do too.
I think I just read slower for a living.
Maybe that's better.
I agree with that.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a very unique situation. I don't know how many other times you're gonna come in and not be expanding the area that
No,
the non-conforming use is located.
I've never seen it before. I'm thinking about it, but
And I know
I'm,
we're trying to, when we make changes, bring the non-conforming use current.
right.
I assume that's what Nick
But
is.
this is a new site plan. It's a whole new site plan.
Right, which is different, by the way, than what you presented to me, which is only an amended site plan.
Okay, so, yeah, but the point is, they're not just amending the site plan, they're submitting for a new site
Yeah.
plan. And they can't meet
Can hear me?
these regulations on the new site plan. So they will need a variance for the new site plan.
Which is the next case.
Right, if you
Right.
uphold my decision, yes. If you don't, then they don't need a variance.
Okay.
But this is a new site plan.
No, I understand, but I have to say that in a new site plan, they're not impacting or changing the area that's
Yes, but
an existing non-conformance.
A new site plan, you have all the regulations, you have your rules, and you have to meet those for a new site plan.
Regardless of any grandfathering of existing conditions.
If you can't, then you can ask for a variance. And
No, I
then
understand that, yeah.
you ask for a variance
Right.
before you can, can go to the planning board with their new site plan.
Right.
I think if your ordinance was silent and didn't have section 8.2, I would agree with Mr. Codner, but I think that's in there to address these type of situations. You have an existing non-conforming use that's not being expanded, and this falls into that.
Council?
I mean, I think they can both be correct, but the problem is which one trumps. So I might want a legal opinion on that.
Alternatively, you have your variance request pending.
That's right there.
Yeah.
Next case, if we, depending on how we decide here. So from what I'm hearing, you're suggesting that we either get a legal ruling from our internal legal folks, or we could
If
just,
I were you, I would just move forward with the variance.
yeah.
If that's the way the board's gonna pursue it, then
let's
yes.
Get that, so we,
Well, let me put it to you this way. If your only goal is, if you don't have a preference one way or the other, then we can move forward with the variance and then get a legal opinion depending on what happens
Right.
with that. But if the variance is granted and you don't, it doesn't matter. to you.
Obviously, our goal is to keep the existing pavement, so how we get there, I guess, doesn't matter. The only reason I brought this up is because I thought this was a unique case within your ordinance that I feel that, I think this could apply to other projects because there are some, rare but existing nonconformities on existing lots, and so you shouldn't have to immediately conform the entire property just because you happen to be adding to the site plan, unless you were enhancing that nonconformity. That would be a problem. But if you had like the corner of a building that was nonconforming and you were putting another building in the back corner, Do you need a variance now for that? Nick would say you do. I would argue you don't. So it just might be, it might avoid some cases coming to you if, that's why I brought it forward.
So I think the best way to move forward then would be to move to the variance
The
request.
variance.
Okay, so we have to go through the process of,
So do we officially suggest we
do you want to withdraw this?
work it? 'Cause-
Or do you want us to go through the exercise of denying it or voting on it, I guess I should
Or
say?
delaying it until we get a legal.
If you want to just have on record that you're looking for a legal opinion on that, I can withdraw the request and
And
move
move
to the
forward with
variance. Yeah.
I don't know that we want to put it forward for, like, I mean, that's a decision I guess we can make, but
We
I'm
can
not
make
going
it
to base it, I'm not going to certify that to
Well,
him.
So what would he, like, if we denied the variance, which could happen, right? Does he withdraw it or continue it for the moment, and then we see where we get to on the variance request?
I see where we're going. We can table this one and move to the variance
I
one.
agree.
Okay,
That's-
I would table and let's move to the next.
you're okay with that?
Yes.
Can you just, on the record?
Yep, that, we're okay with tabling the administrative appeal.
Okay.
Okay, so case number 9/17/2025-2,
Interesting one.
a request for a variance from LZO section 4.4.1.3.h.1 to allow paved area to remain in the perimeter green area. The parcel is located at 5 Ricker Avenue in the Industrial 2 zoning district, tax map 28, lot 22-23, Epic Properties owner and Dubay Group applicant.
So happy to go through any level of the criteria, but I think obviously from our previous discussions we just had, you're well familiar with what we're up against. We would be requesting relief from the landscaping buffer to allow for that existing pavement to remain. Do you need me to go through the criteria?
I don't know that we need you to go through the, well, so the criteria you used was the same for both, and the variance criteria is a little different. We are looking for, it's not contrary to the public interest. So you're really relying on, and I mean, maybe that's okay, that it's been there for 50 years, so.
I mean, I can touch through the criteria quickly.
Okay.
I mean, I have them written out. if-
Very good.
So regarding the contrary to the public interest, you're right, you hit that one. We're basically saying that we feel that all the improvements that we're doing meet all the applicable zoning, and the only area we're talking for relief on is an area that's been for 50-plus years in use, and obviously, as the abutter, that's been there this entire time. Spirit of the ordinance, the existing pavement area seeking relief was constructed over 50 years ago. It's been in use since it was constructed. This predated the green area requirement, and the proposed improvements do not make any existing pavement condition any more non-conforming, so therefore the spirit of the ordinance is still observed. Substantial justice is done. The existing pavement has been in use since it was constructed. It provides circulation and parking to the existing building on site. The new proposal develops land on the southern portion of the property, meets all setbacks. Substantial justice for the applicant is done in allowing a pre-existing use to continue to operate as it has for over the past 50 years. Surrounding properties are not diminished. The pavement has been installed and in use since the early 1980s, and the new improvements do not propose any work in this pre-existing green space encroachment. So certainly not making it any different or worse. As far as hardship, no fair and substantial relationship exists between the general public purpose of the ordinance and provision and the specific application of that provision to the property. So the purpose of the ordinance in this case is to provide perimeter green space between abutting properties within the industrial zone. This provision would apply to all new construction and should not apply to existing areas which were constructed prior to the ordinance provision. This area has been developed for 50 years and is not proposed to be altered in any way by the new proposal. The use would be reasonable because the proposal meets all those applicable zoning requirements, and the existing pavement is proposed to stay in the previously constructed location and maintain the existing use. So therefore, it is reasonable.
Just to run through this, we do not, do you see any changes in the neighborhood if by us continuing to allow the encroachment? Any
Do
change in
I?
the- Yeah,
Oh, no,
thank you. Any health or safety concerns?
none.
Okay. Can you just go into a little more detail? I know we briefly discussed what was going to happen if you had to make the change, that you were going to lose some parking spaces.
Sure. So as you can see from the aerial image, the building, as it's placed as it is, has a circulation lane directly adjacent to the building, and the parking spaces associated with that building are adjacent to that circulation lane. So the encroachment that you see would require a reduction in the overall length of those parking spaces to meet that 15-foot requirement. And so therefore, it would make all of those parking spaces essentially along that whole edge substandard or non-compliant, and would be a substantial reduction in the existing parking of the building.
If you reduce the parking, would you still be in compliance with all current?
No, because we essentially, we don't have an area on the entrance side of that building, because obviously the main entrance is on the left-hand side of the page, as it's shown here. So there would be no parking adjacent to the building with those being removed.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions, concerns?
Nope.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, we'll close the public portion. I do not see anyone in the audience that's going to speak for or against. Anybody want to discuss anything?
No.
Before we go into deliberation? Okay.
Granting the variance would or would not be contrary to the public interest? I would say would not.
I agree.
That won't alter the character of the neighborhood.
No, it's an industrial zone. It's been there for
50 years.
yes.
Spirit of the ordinance would or would not be observed because? I would say it would. No threat to health, safety, or public welfare.
I would agree
Right.
with that.
Again, industrial area. It's been there 50 years.
Excuse me.
Granted the variance would or would not do substantial justice because? I would say it would.
It
Oh,
would,
loss to the applicant.
provides
Agreed.
parking to the existing building on site,
And the applicant's
no loss to the general public.
For the following reasons, the values of surrounding properties would or would not be diminished.
So it would not be.
I would say would not.
Because
Because this is an industrial area.
And
doesn't change
non-conforming
what's
already been there.
pavement should not impact adjacent property values.
This one.
Owing to special conditions of the property that distinguish it from other properties in the area, denial of the variance would result in unnecessary hardship because there is or is not a fair and substantial relationship between the general public purpose of the ordinance provision and the specific application of that provision to the property because?
I would say is not.
I agree.
I agree.
Yeah, I would say it's not.
Why do you say?
I would say it is not because it's an industrial zone. It's been used that way for 50 years. The purpose of the ordinance was for green space, and there's been no green space there. And I don't know that changing
Predates the
it.
green space.
Pardon me?
Predates the green space.
Yes, predates the green space. Which makes this property different than others in the area.
I agree.
And it's reasonable to have parking.
You get to part too quick.
Pardon?
You get to part
I
too
did.
quick.
I did.
The proposed use is or is not a reasonable one? It is because parking is reasonable.
Agree.
Do we have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion in case number 9/17/2025-2 to grant the request for a variance from LZO section 4.4.1.3.h.1.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
So 25-1 is tabled, or?
Motion.
Would you like me to formally withdraw that request?
Yes,
Please.
I would do so.
thank you.
Okay, so case number 9/17/2025-1 is withdrawn.
Thank you.
Thank you for pizza tonight.
Who made the second?
Who seconded
Tired.
you?
I seconded.
Do this all the time.
Good night, ladies and gentlemen.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I do have one thing to talk about.
Not adjourned yet.
Oh, I thought you did.
Quickly. There is a land use law conference. It is scheduled for October 4th, Saturday. It's in person, and it is at Southern New Hampshire University in Manchester. Again, it's more educational for being on the zoning board if you like it. There's ZBA questions and answers, hypotheticals, changing to planning, zoning, and building codes in 2025, planning board roles and responsibilities. If you're interested, I can give you this information, and the town actually pays for the registration fee.
I'm looking
Is
at
there
it.
a chance to send an email with toll boards for that, please?
Yep.
When is it, when did you say it was?
Saturday, October 4th, 9 a.m. to 3
Oh,
p.m.
I won't be here. I'm gonna be somewhere else. But it sounds like a good conference.
Yeah, I'll take a picture of it and figure it out.
Trust me, I'm working hard zoning at the State House.
In our next meet,
We're already working it hard.
I have a question. We didn't approve August minutes.
Correct. They're going to be revised.
Okay, that's fine.
our next meeting is
15th?
15th, correct?
Yeah.
We good? Anything from
Need a
you
motion
guys?
to eat, any
We're gonna-
communications?
Either we, or I don't know if you, if the board has to look into this too, or that, the question about the 4.6.1.8.
Conservation Commission?
Yeah,
The what?
The Conservation Commission that the
Yeah.
gentleman brought up.
this says that anything, any appeal or
Okay, I don't
request for
think that we should
variance
be
has to
having
go
this
before the
discussion.
Conservation Commission.
Okay, let's table that. We ready to adjourn?
I would make a motion to adjourn.
All
I'll
those in-
second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
It is something to look into, thought.